Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Kufyud Beis in Baba Kama, as we learn for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael and Sum Batzar V'Shivya, and also for the Aliyas and Shama of my great grandfather Pinchas ben Elazar Elimelech Halevi. Amar Rava. We're about 2 lines above where the lines get wide in the Gemara. Amar Rava. We talked. The Mishnah has been discussing about if your man stole something. Or otherwise left something to his children, what is the obligation of those children to return the stolen or lost item to the original owner? So Rava says if the father left over them a borrowed cow, father died, he had borrowed a cow, the children were allowed to use it because let's say it was given to borrow for 3 months. So their father died after 1 month, the children could use it for the remainder of the time. And let's say it died, they're not responsible for it because they weren't the ones who borrowed it. They never accepted upon themselves the responsibility, right? They didn't accept themselves to guard it, but if it was in their possession, they're allowed to use it. If it died, they're not responsible. Because let's say they thought it was their father's. In the first case, maybe they thought it was borrowed. They knew it wasn't theirs, and they were just using it. They figured, the owner didn't come to grab it back, so they could use it, not responsible for it. Let's say they thought it was their father's, should it be meat, and they slaughtered it and ate it. Now, what are they responsible? They did get pleasure from it, but they don't have to pay the full value. They pay a cheaper value, like what you'd pay for cheapened meat. Rashi says that's about 2/3 of the regular market value of the meat. But let's say the father had left over some real estate. The real estate always guaranteed his loans and any other obligations he had. Then they have to pay the full amount. Now, what are we talking about? Are we talking about the first case where the animal just died on them? Or are we talking about the second case where they actually slaughtered it and had enough? Some say it's on the ratio, that it's on that if the father left some real estate, even if the animal just died in their possession, the father had accepted responsibility and had guaranteed it with his real estate. So if the father left them real estate, they'd have to pay even if the animal just died. Of course, died here, Rashi used Lashon of Mesa Kedarka, but Mesa Kedarka show is not really responsible. He's responsible for Mesa Machas Malacha or whatever. It depends, or actually, I shouldn't say that. That's the other way around, I think, right? If they're Mesa Kedarka, he's not Mesa Kedarka. He is responsible for Mesa Kedarka. Maybe if the father left over real estate, he would be. If it's Mesa Machmalacha that he's not responsible for because that's what he took him for. So not responsible for Mesa Machmalacha, but he is responsible for Mesa Kedarka. So then they have to pay. So seeking masla ratio being masla sefer. Some say it's going on the ratio that the father's real estate is mortgaged to this animal to pay for this animal. Some say it's going on the sefer when we talk about if they slaughtered the animal and ate it. Mandamasla ratio. If you was going in the ratio, koshkana sefer. If their father's real estate is responsible, even when the animal just died on them, without them doing anything, and their father's obligation is there based on his real estate, koshkana sefer. Certainly, where they went and slaughtered it themselves, their father's real estate would have to pay for the animal. Upligi Rapapa. This disagrees with Rapapa. What do we mean by this? So Rashi explains. Rava is saying effectively that the father's responsibility is there from the time that he borrowed it. So as soon as he borrowed it and he had real estate, he's responsible. If something happened to it, even if the father's dead, father's not here anymore, but his responsibility carries over and survives his death because the responsibility is from the time that he borrowed it. That's Rava Shita, and this would disagree with Rav Papa. Who's Rav Papa? Rav Papa, we're going to talk about his Shita in a couple of lines. Rav Papa says responsibility is only from the time that the accident happened, not before. So at the time that the accident happened, the animal died, father wasn't there anymore, so there's no responsibility. This disagrees with Rav Papa. But if you learn that we added on, that Rava said that if the father had real estate that he had mortgaged against the value of the para, that's where you have to pay. But but in the case where the animal just died, you don't have to pay. You don't use the father's real estate because the father's real estate was only mortgaged from the time of the accident. and not from the time of the death. And by the time this animal died, the father had long died. Behind Rav Papa, that's exactly Rav Papa's shita, that the responsibility is only there from the time of the accident and not from the time of the original loan. Listen to this case. Rav Papa says, listen, if an animal was already, you stole an animal, you already took the animal, v'tafcha b'Shabbos, and you shechted it on Shabbos. You shechted it on Shabbos. Are you chayiv for Shabbos, for being a chatas for shechting an animal by mistake on Shabbos? Isn't it kamlev rabine? No. You're chayiv on Shabbos, shekvar chayiv b'geneva, kodem she'avadei yisur Shabbos. You're already chayiv for the geneva before. Even if right, even you're chayiv for the geneva before. So even though now you're going to be chayiv daled behei, right? So what about that? Don't we say, we don't say kamlev rabine on the knas. We only say kamlev rabine if the act of stealing or the act of robbery took place at a time when or under circumstances we'd all be chayiv misa for the same thing. So if you stole it on Shabbos and shechted it, right, and you shechted it basically you stole it by shechting it on Shabbos, then you would be potter for to pay for the gzela. You wouldn't see it. Why? Because you're chayiv for chayiv Shabbos, you're chayiv misa for Shabbos, or you're being a chatas in case it was a b'shogeg. You're chayiv misa for Shabbos, you're potter from paying. But if you already chayiv to pay for the animal, let's say you robbed it, not even a burglary, but you robbed it before, right? And now you want to talk about Geneva and Aveda, you're talking about Geneva or Daled Behei, there you would pay, because the Rashi explains that the Knas, the extra Daled Behei, is a special Chiddush, the Chiddush Torah, and that doesn't pater him from, the Knas does not pater him from the Chiyav Misa, and he's not pater from paying Knas because of Chiyav Misa. Chiyav Misa only takes away, Kamaravi takes away the basic obligation. But if the obligation was there, he robbed the animal on Thursday, and he shechted it on Shabbos, he'd have to not only be chayiv for Shabbos, he'd also be chayiv dal behei. So that's his haisapar gnubel if it was already stolen, already possessed for tafcha b'Shabbos. Chayiv, it's chayiv for Shabbos. He's not only chayiv for Shabbos, obviously he's chayiv for the Geneva and Aveda. Chayiv dal behei. Shekvar chayiv b'Geneva kodem she'avadei yisur Shabbos. He's chayiv for Geneva before there was an yisur Shabbos there. The common remedy is only when it's simultaneous. The chayiv for the higher punishment, for let's say for misa, for violating Shabbos, took place at the same time that he stole it. So you're chayiv for Shabbos, you're potter for the stealing. But if the stealing took place before, you're chayiv on Shabbos and you're chayiv for the stealing. And you're also chayiv the dal b'hei, even though the dal b'hei is really from your act on Shabbos, because the dal b'hei is not the money, it's not the principle, it's the knas. And the Kama Rabbi only takes away the keren, the principle, but it doesn't affect the knas, because that's a special chiddush that Torah's machadash. Let's say though the animal was under your possession because you borrowed it, you didn't steal it, and then the tafcha b'Shabbos you shechted it on Shabbos. So what happened here? You borrowed it, and now you shechted on Shabbos. So what happened now? You're chiyuv for stealing it, and your chiyuv for Shabbos was simultaneously when you shechted it. Then potter, you're potter from daled hey, she is a Shabbos v'sikaneva bon keachad. You say, didn't I say that the daled hey is not dependent on the kamlan rabbinay? Yeah, but if you're potter for the basic amount, it's only daled hey, not gimel v'daled. So if you're potter for the principal, there's only kefil or daled hey when you're also paying the principal. If you're not paying the principal because of the chiyuv for Shabbos kamlan rabbinay, then there's no daled hey. There's no gimel v'daled, so to speak, right? It doesn't go down by one level. So what is Rav Papa saying effectively? Rav Papa saying is that that if it was already borrowed to, if it was borrowed to you on when your responsibility takes place from the time that you shechted it, from the time of the accident, basically, not from before. Like Rashi said before, Rav Papa, the first of the wide lines, I'm going to come on, Rami Chiyav Onsen Lo Rami Chiyav Onsen Ashoa Ad Sha'atanos, until an accident happens. It's only at that point then that there's responsibility. There's no responsibility before the accident. In other words, his property is not mortgaged to him before. So Rava, depending on how you learn Rava, if Rava is going on the Sefer, then he agrees with Rav Papa. If Rava is going on the Reisha, then he disagrees with Rav Papa. Tan Rabbanim. Beishav Zigzeilu Asher Gazel. Pasuk says if you steal something, if you rob it, you have to return it. Now it says Beishav Zigzeilu, you return the Gzela. Asher Gazel seems redundant. What does it mean, Asher Gazel, that you stole? What other Gzela would there be? You're returning the Gzela. That's what we're talking about. Matam Asher Gazel. What does it also teach me? That even this is going on the children. Yachser Ka'ain Shegazel. That if the item is here and the father died, the children have to return it. Mikan Amru, Hagozel, Lamachlas Bana. If you steal something and you gave, let's say it was apples and the kids ate them up, then P'tur Misham, the father died. The father is responsible to return it. He's responsible to pay for it if he's alive. But if he dies, and the item is no longer here, the children don't have to pay. But if he left the items in front of them, meaning when he died, those items are still there, then we said before on this page yesterday, whether the children are bar mitzvah, whether they're bar mitzvah, whether they're adults, or bein tanim, whether they are minors, chayavim, they have to pay because the item is here. That's the Tanakama sheet. That's a chachamim. Simcha said that gedolim chayavim tanim turim. He says that children are never responsible to pay to make good on their father's obligation. Like we saw yesterday, there's a machlokas between the Rabbanan and Sumchas. Now we tell a story that confirms this. Bar Chamud Rav Yirmiyah. Rav Yirmiyah had a father-in-law who passed away. And the father-in-law had a young boy, had a minor, a 10-year-old, we'll call him. And the 10-year-old, Tarak Goli Ba'api Rav Yirmiyah. He closed the door in front of Rav Yirmiyah. Rav Yirmiyah had come to take possession of the house. Maybe he felt that he had made a deal with the father-in-law and bought it. It's always good when families do business with one another, father-in-law, son-in-law. It's always a good indication that things are going to work out. Right? You know what I mean? So Bar Chamud Rav Yirmiyah, so this Rav Yirmiyah, this is really his brother-in-law. He had a minor brother-in-law. And Rav Yirmiyah came to take possession of the house, I guess soon after the Shiva. And the boy closed the door on him, locked the door in front of him. Rav Yirmiyah came before Rav and Amar, you can't look, the kid took away, I have a claim on the house. The father-in-law left it for me, or I bought it from him, whatever, gave it to me, whatever. Promised me that I could have the yeshiva there. I came for Rav and said, Shalom Toveh, what do you want from the kid? The kid's demanding it. He's the heir. Father died, the kid is the heir. I could bring proof that I took possession of it while the father was alive. I have proof. So Rav said, can you bring witnesses? This gets us into another topic. Can you bring witnesses when the litigant is not there? You have a plaintiff and a defendant, a toveya and a nitva. Now over here, you're claiming it from this child. Child is not capable, right? He's the baldin is not here. The father's dead, and the child is like, if I cut and command lesson, you can't have a case against the child. Take more of a law, you can't. We learned we just learned before that if the father left something over, whether it's the adults or children, where the children were adults or minors, either way they have to pay. So he said to him, what do you mean? You got over here the simcha. Simcha says children don't have to pay. Omar, so Rav Yirmiyah said, if the whole world's going to bend over backwards, so to speak, double up a quite a simchas, you're going to go like simchas, we don't pass. I get left going to take away my share over here. What are you going to tell me? As simchas says, what about the chacham? The chacham say that if the father left something over, whether it's adults or whether the children are adults or minors, they have to pay it back. Meanwhile, while this discussion was going on, the question came down that came for Ravu, who was really like Rav Yirmiyah's Rebbe. Omar, and in defending Rav Yirmiyah, said, Lo Shmiyalahu, have you not heard? Hadar Rav Yosef Bar Chama Rav Oshia. This halacha that Rav Yosef Bar Chama said in the name of Rav Oshia, Damar Rav Yosef Bar Chama Rav Oshia. Tinok should talk about it. Let's say a child. Tinok means not a baby, it means a child, a minor, who gathered up his slaves. V'yar l'tochsara, went down to somebody's field. So he took a posse. He took his slaves, took a posse, and went and claimed somebody else's field. He said, "This is my field." We don't say namtan shiyagda. We don't say, "Oh, let's wait till he's bar mitzvah so we could have a claim with him." We don't let him keep the field till his bar mitzvah and then bring him to court. You take it away from right away. You take the field from him. He took it away. You take the field away from right away. And when he becomes of age, when he comes bar mitzvah, then bring Adam. Then let him bring Adam Venera, and then we'll decide it then. Imshal, we'll decide then. But the point is that if a child grabs something away, seizes some property from somebody with power, with strength, by bringing a posse along with him, we don't say, well, we can't take it away from he's not bar mitzvah. We have to wait. No, take it away from now. When it is bar mitzvah, we'll take it. We'll judge then what the case is. So you see that even with children, cases go on, right? That you say that is it really true that that you can't have a case prosecute with a child. Here in this case, you see that you do take it away from the child. How can you compare? Hasam, this is, I guess, Rav Avin is answering. Hasam, who the mafkinim there, we take it away from the child. He had no chazak of his father. This property was in the rishus of Yankel. And this child, this minor, went and grabbed the posse, grabbed a bunch of his slaves, and went and grabbed it away, seized it away. We don't know that it belonged to him or it belonged to his father. So just because the kid came with strength, with a posse, doesn't allow him to keep it. So we take it away and we say, fine, we'll judge it when the kid's bar mitzvah. Right now we're taking it away. He's the one who seized it away from Yankel. Where the father had a chazak, in this case, what happened? Rav Yirmiyah's father-in-law died, right? And the minor son, he was the apparent, the heir apparent, as they say, right? He was the heir apparent. He was the child. He had a chazak of his father. No, we don't say that. So therefore, they discounted Rav Yirmiyah's claim. Amar Rav Ashi, Amar Rav Shabsai. Even though he was really going like Sumchas, but someone said if the kid left it over, but in this case, you're trying to bring a case against the kid. It's not simply like we know this stuff was stolen. It's not exactly like the case of the Chacham and Sumchas, because they're talking about when the father died, he had stolen stuff or he had borrowed stuff and he left some stuff here. And the question is, can we have a claim against children or not? Do you take it away from children or not? But over here, it's where you're really taking away real property that the children had a chazak on. It's not like, the father stole the property. Not exactly the same case. Amar Rav Ashi, Amar Rav Shabsai. This has gotten us into another case, into the standard case. Can you accept Adam Shlobafei Baldin? You have a prosecution of plaintiff and a defendant, and one doesn't show up. Can you proceed with a case, let's say, against the defendant? He's not there, or it's not fair. You got to bring. Can you accept Adam to testify against the defendant, when the defendant's not there? He says you could. Toiber Rabbi Yochanan asked like in amazement, how could you say that you could accept Adam against the defendant, so to speak, in absentia when the defendant didn't show up? So Kilmer Rabbi Yosef accepted this halacha of Rav Ashi Rav Shabsai when in a special case he was sick. He was sick, meaning who was sick? So Rashi says, in other words, maybe in this case, if the whoever was sick, it could be the plaintiff, it could be the defendant. Point is that he was deathly sick, and if you wouldn't proceed with the case now, he'll die and he'll never be able to prosecute the case. Don't show you chola. Oh, Adam chola. Maybe the Adam were sick. They were dying. They have cases today in modern courts. What do they do in America? You've seen this where somebody's very sick, so they videotape his testimony, right? And they save it for later on. They accept that kind of thing. And halacha, maybe that wouldn't be accepted because it's got to be, oral, it's got to be live. But in any case, they accept it because he's good. Adam are dying. Maybe the Adam had to travel overseas. They had a El Al flight to leave. And they said, look, the Adam are leaving. Our only case is if you show up now, you have to show up tomorrow in court because the Adam are leaving. And if they leave, there won't be any Adam. So in these extreme cases, then we would allow testimony to take place, even not in front of both litigants. Right? They were going to go, and they sent him, you better come, but he didn't come. So in these extreme cases, then we do allow testimony, even though both litigants are not there. They didn't. He said the same halacha. You can accept Adam, even though the litigant's not there. I understood, I heard from Shmuel directly, that this is where it could go into Paschal Ebedina. There was already an open court. In other words, the case had already been opened and it started to be prosecuted. Going to Paschal Ebedina, they started already the case before, and this day he didn't show up, and now he didn't come. But if they haven't opened up the case yet, he could say, I know the best, and I go to Lazilna. I don't want to be judged by your court. I want to go to the best, I go to Yerushalayim. So if that's the case, even if they started the case, he could say, listen, I don't accept you. I want to go to the bigger court in Yerushalayim. The best, I go to Lazilna. Ravina could go and not get diskami best, and I go to. It's like when you have a disk is like an authorization, a writ that allows that from the best, and I go to, it says to the smaller best that you can prosecute this case. So that's not a valid argument. If the case is not open yet, fine. So then maybe he has an argument. But if the case is already open and they're prosecuted, and now this guy doesn't want to show up in court anymore, then you say, too bad. You can bring testimony even not in absence. And if he has a claim, I want to go to the Bezdin Gadol, we're talking about where there was an authorization from the Bezdin Gadol that the Bezdin Gadol, the Katan can prosecute it. Amarav, the comment is star. Can you authenticate a star? Many times, what do you have? You have an IOU, a written star, written from the Malva to the Lova. The Lova says, the Lova writes to the Malva, I owe you the money, and there's Adam signed there. Now, maybe the Adam are planning to leave overseas, and the Malva is concerned that when he pulls out the IOU, the Lova will say it's a fraud, it's a forgery. So what you do is you authenticate it in front of a Bezdin. What do? You bring the Adam, the Malva brings the Adam to the court, and they testify, this is our signatures, and the Bezdin says, oh, okay, we were sitting here, these three judges, we were sitting here, and these Adam testified about their signatures, and we've confirmed, we've authorized, we've authenticated the star. So you can do that without the Baldin there. In other words, even though the Lova is not there, the Malva brings the IOU, and he brings the Adam to court, and he says to the court, look here, the Adam testify in front of the judges that, yes, this is our signature, this is a valid document, even if the Lova is not there. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, you're not Mekayim it unless the Adam are there, unless the litigant is there, the Lova is there. I'll explain to you Rabbi Yochanan's reasoning why he says that you can't authenticate it unless the Lova is there too, the borrower. We talk about an animal goring 3 times. If testimony was given in front of the owner, and then he didn't guard the animal, then he's a mu'ah and you have to pay, right? If you're making a claim against him, let him be there. He should be there. In the same way, here the defendant, the Lova, should be there if you're confirming, you're authenticating a star that goes against him, that prosecutes him to pay the money. Amarava. You can authenticate a star the way I described, where the Malva brings the Adam to court, even if the Bezdin's, even if the Baldin, I think I said Bezdin. Even if the litigant, in this case the Lova, is not there, even if he's screaming, even if he stands there and says, no, it's forged, but there's Adam who are there, and the Adam say, 2 Adam is always believed as anything else, and nothing stronger than 2 Adam, and they say, we signed on this, these are our signatures, and we signed on the star. Even if the Lova claims that it is forged, just saying it's forged is very easy to say, oh, it's a forgery, right? Everything is a forgery. It's easy to say that. That doesn't mean anything. So the halacha is you can that's what Rava says. The halacha is you can authenticate anyway. If the Lova says, listen, wait a minute, okay, maybe my claim that it's forged isn't enough. Give me some time. Give me like 30 days so that until I can bring witnesses to show that it's a forgery, so that I can invalidate this IOU. I will invalidate. We give him the 30 days. That's the standard amount. If he says, give me some time and I'll bring witnesses, fine. If he brings in witnesses who invalidate the star, fine, then it's invalidated. In other words, it's true that we can validate it. We can validate and authenticate a star, even if the Lova is screaming it's forged. But if he says, I have witnesses, let me bring proof. I'm going to bring proof that it's a forgery, that it didn't take place. I have witnesses that this is that it's not valid. Then we allow him. We don't authenticate it until we see if he brings the Adam. He also if he doesn't bring him, after 30 days, we give him 3 days. Bahav is Monday, Thursday, Monday, right? Today's Thursday, right? Next Thursday, Mr. Mekasiyim. We give him Bahav the 3 days. Those are the days, because Bezdin, that the Konas Esra Bezdin sits in the local courts on these days, Monday, because we give him 3 more chances. Ilo also, if he doesn't come with witnesses after 3 more chances that the Bezdin is open, right? 3 more chances doesn't. Kasvina psichala, we write against him a warrant. Rashi says a psicha is like a warrant with a shamsa, with a ban. In other words, there's a warrant. He's not paying his loan. In other words, it seems obvious that he's lying, right? He said it's a forgery. Okay, we said fine. We'll give you 30 days to prove it. 30 days pass. He doesn't bring witnesses. We give him 3 more chances while Bezdin's sitting there to show up, and he doesn't do it. Then we write a warrant saying effectively that he's a liar and that he's under the ban for not paying his chov. And this warrant is valid for 90 days. In other words, we give him 90 days in which to pay up. Now, if after 90 days he doesn't pay up, then we're gonna authorize the malva to go distrain upon his property. Why 90 days? Plus, by the first 30 days, so we don't grab his property, we don't go and try to seize any of the lowest property. The Amar Katarf Bazuzi Benesif, he's trying to borrow money. In other words, we figure the first 3 days, he knows that he's got to pay. There's an IOU against him, and he hasn't been able to invalidate it. So we give him 90 days to pay up. In the first 30 days, we figure he's trying to borrow money. Mitzia, the middle 30 days, let's say we don't seize his property. Maybe he couldn't borrow any money. He's trying to sell off his property to pay off the loan. That's what you do when you don't have any money. You sell off your property to pay it back. That's right. The last 30 days of the 90 days, let's say we don't seize his property. The Omar Lokech Gufe Katach Bazuze. He's found a buyer for his property to raise money, but the buyer doesn't have any cash. Do they ever have cash? No. They're looking for a loan from the bank. So we give him these 90 days. Lo asa, he doesn't come after 9 days. Kasvinan adrachta nifse. We write an authorization on his asset. What is an adrachta? It's an authorization that we give to the malva. You can now go seize his property, right? Like I saw before. Like a lien on his property, but it's more than it's an obligation. It's an authorization which says, you're entitled to go and check out his property. In other words, there has to be an assessment, but this gives you the right to go collect. It's an authorization that you can go collect his property. Obviously, it's got to be assessed and stuff to make sure you don't take everything. This is all taking place, this whole business. You first give him 30 days and 90 days. That's all when he says, I'm coming, give me a chance. But if he says, I'm not coming, I claim it's a forgery, I'm not coming at all, then then we give him this authorization immediately to go collect the property from the loan. That's only by a loan. It's also a loan. Because a loan, you could say, it's outstanding. He borrowed the money, he's got to go collect the money, etc. But if it was a deposit, he had no business. Deposit was supposed to stay by him. He wasn't allowed to use the deposit. It was sitting in his property. Then the alter kasvina, we write it right away. If there was he has proof, I gave you this to watch, and now you say you don't have it, then I'm entitled to take your property right away. And when do you write this kind of a drachta? You only write it on real estate. You can go collect this real estate. But on movables, we don't write it that you can go collect the lova's movables. Why? Because maybe the malva, if you give him an adracht on his movables, so maybe he'll go and collect his car and his food and his clothing, etc. The malva will consume them. He'll consume these movables because he has this authorization. If you write an authorization even for movables, and then when the lova actually does show up on my society, maybe the lova eventually will bring proof against it, to invalidate the star. You won't be anything there will be nothing to collect back. The lova won't be able to collect anything from the malva because the malva had consumed everything. It's not there. It was movables that are gone. But if the malva himself has property, then kasvina, then apparently you could write the adrachta even on movables of the lova, because if the malva consumes them and then the lova has a claim against the malva that it was a forgery and he has a valid claim and he ruins the IOU, then he would have what to collect from the malva below. But it's not really the case. We don't really hold that way. We don't write an authorization to seize the property of the lova only on his real estate, not on his movables. Even though the malva has karka, we don't know that he'll be able to collect. Maybe his property will depreciate in value, and therefore we don't. So basically, what we're saying is the lova is entitled to make a claim and say, I'm going to bring proof that the IOU is invalid. We give him all this time. If he says he's coming, fine. It's only by a loan, not by a pikadon. If after all this time he's not able to do everything, then we write an authorization for the malva to collect from the lova's assets, but only real estate, not movables. And when we write it, modina, we let him know. We let the lova know that now the malva has a authorization to seize your property. It's got to come to that's only if the lova is nearby. If he's far away, he's across the ocean, then you don't have to let him know. It's just too bad. You'll just go grab If he's far away, but he has some relatives or some acquaintances who are nearby, then we let them know. Inami, or maybe you can let him know via, a caravan that's going. That was the means of communication in those days. You let him know. The machine like Tracer Yaku, we wait 12 months until a caravan can go there and notify him and come back. In other words, you don't seize his property till then. Ravina, like the case of Ravina, Shah Lamar Acha, that he allowed to wait for Maracha. Maracha was a man who had a claim on other people, right? That people had borrowed money from him and didn't pay. And Rashi says that the lover wasn't here, and he made him wait 12 months a year. In other words, he didn't allow the authorization to seize the property until a caravan went 12 months. They allowed him 12 months to go and let the lova know, be bechazoi from that place. It took a while. But that's not really the halacha. But they were talking about this Maracha was a violent man. If he had gotten the authorization immediately, you would never be. If he would have seized the land by authorization and then proof would have been brought otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to get the land back. And that was a special case. They made sure that the lova was notified, even if it took months and months to notify him. But normally, in a regular case, we don't wait until the shliach, meaning the court messenger, the bailiff or whatever, the court messenger goes. The Tlasim B'Shabbos, like he goes on Tuesday, notifies him. V'asabar becomes back on Wednesday, and B'Shabbos Wednesday Ulachamsha B'Shabbos on Thursday, like today. Koi Bedina, that's when Bezdin sits. In other words, just give him a couple of days to notify him. This business about the 12 months was a special case. Amar Ravina, High Shluchot Rabbanan. When you have a court appointee, a court bailiff, who goes and notifies them, you better show up in court. You have to come to court because this case is going to be held against you. We believe him like two. In other words, when he says, I went there and I reported to him and the guy still didn't come, you believe him like two people. That's only for an oral ban. In other words, if the guy doesn't show up, we put him on a ban, right? We put him on chayrim. But for a like we said, a warrant that's going to result in a ban. That's like it's a warrant that if you don't show up in this and this time, you don't take care of it, you're going to be under ban. Now, when you have a written ban, once it ceases, meaning once we say it stops, the ban, you're out of the ban. So the person who wrote the ban, the sofer, has to be paid, and the person under the ban, he has to pay him. So and since the person who was under the ban has to pay, he has to pay the scribe. When they tear up the ban, you have to pay the scribe for his effort. The Kabbalah and Mace of Zuzal Saf, you got to pay the sofer for writing it. Low. Then we don't say that. In other words, then we don't necessarily believe the court bailiff, the court messenger, because here, since there's money involved, we don't believe him alone, and he's got to bring solid proof that the man was notified about his subpoena. Amar Avina, let's say a person was summoned to the court, a legal summons, right? To come to court on a certain day. And let's say the bailiff goes to the house, the guy's not there, right? He has to, what do we call that? A subpoena. Yeah, it's a subpoena, but he's got to hand, he's got to hand it over. It's got to be served, correct. He's got to be served. Now, if the court appointee can't find him, so you can give it even you can give it to his wife or neighbors. So if he's not around right now, he's out of town today or whatever, he's at work. So you can give it to his wife or to his neighbors. That's only if the man's not home, not in the city. At least must, but if he's in the city, we don't say that. We don't give it to the wife or the neighbors. Because they'll figure Amer. We figure Amer lo Amerle. We don't have to. We figured Damrinam. Amer, maybe the wife or the neighbors didn't let him know. Lo Amerle, because they themselves figured Ashkechenu Shlicha the Bezdin. Right? If he's in town, what do we have to let him know for? If he's out of town, then we know, okay, you have to let him know when he gets back. But if he's in town, then we don't rely on the wife or the neighbors, because the wife or the neighbors can figure, listen, what do we have to let him know for? The Shliach of Bezdin, the court messenger will let him know. Probably the Shliach of Bezdin found him, met him on the road. And he told him, even if he's out of town, we also don't. When do we allow? We allow you to give this to serve the man, or to give him the subpoena only via the wife or neighbors, Only when the man returns home from out of town, he doesn't have to pass by the door of the court. But even if he's out of town, but in order when he returns home, he has to pass by the court door. Then we don't allow it. We don't rely on the wife or the neighbors. Because they figured the peasant found him. Then they told him again. That's only if he's coming back that day. If he's not planning on coming back that day, if he's out of town for some period of time, a week or longer, whatever, a few days, we don't rely on the wife or the neighbors, because they'll forget. In other words, you can only rely on the wife or the neighbors if he's out of town that day, but he's coming back that day, or even if he's even then, that's only if he's not going to pass by the court. Right, but if it's going to take several days, they'll forget about it. So we don't rely on the wife and the names. Amarabba, I'm on the kasla psicha. If a warrant of a ban was written on this man, because he doesn't come to court, that if he went because he refused to come to court, so they gave him a warrant. We don't tear it up until he actually shows up. It's not enough for him to say, "Okay, I'll show up one day." Once he says, "I'm not coming to court," we don't tear up this warrant until he actually shows up. Let's say there was a verdict against him and he refuses to listen to the verdict. So also we don't tear up the verdict, we don't tear up the psicha, the warrant that was written against him, until he actually conforms and listens to the court. It actually takes action and follows the verdict. We don't tear it up until he actually listens. That's not the halacha. As soon as he says, "I will follow it," we tear it up. In other words, if he says, if we write it against him because he won't show up to court, then we don't tear up the warrant until he actually shows up. If we write a warrant against him because he's not following the verdict of the court, he's not agreeing to pay whatever he has to pay or to take care of it, then as soon as he says, "I'll take care of it," then we can tear up the warrant at that point in time. We'll pick it up from here from the two dots tomorrow. Mitzvah Shem. Have a good day, everybody.